In today's video, we have a viewer's request. We look at the Essex boy murders and the murder of Dave Rolex King and his connection to Tony Tucker. No deep dives, we're going to plummet into this one. This is Curios&Spiritual. We take a look at Essex, the Redstone murders, the murder of Davey King, and the trial. Now we go back to the 1990s, to Essex. But to explain Essex the way it is, let me do a quick outline, because it'll give you an idea if you didn't know, and you can amaze your mates with the facts you will now know. Now in the late 1960s, Essex was mainly farming and fishing, with contraband for London gangs coming in from the fishing vessels. Now London back in World War II had been heavily bombed. The buildings left, the beautiful but run-down Victorian houses where families and communities lived, were considered slums by the London Council, and the government had taken the wrecking ball to whole communities. The high-rise estates began to be built in place, with communities lost. If you want to know how bad the council destroyed London, take a Jack the Ripper tour. Nowhere from the actual murders actually exists anymore. In the 1960s to the 1970s, it still did. The council done more damage than over 1,000 V2 rockets the Germans chucked over at us. Better still, watch a TV episode of Hazel or The Sweeney, the TV series, and not the crap film one. And why oh why did that director remake The Firm? There's only one Becht, and my friends, he has a moustache. Anyway, in those days, you'd have whole families, aunts and uncles living on the same street, torn apart by government planning. For those who could afford to escape, many left. Essex, as well as many other towns, began to grow with immigrants settling in London in the high-rises, local to the work they'd come over for. In Essex now, especially along the Thames estuary, is a replacement population of escaped Cockneys. Cockneys themselves, basically now all but an extinct group, and their descendants, along with a mix of others who came to the area over the subsequent decades for the rail links into the city, used by office commuters, has really pushed up the land values and made it a prime location. Essex is a victim of fast development and quickly changing demographics. Essex 1960s farmers and fishermen was arguably one of the first counties outside the now defunct Middlesex to have its culture wiped out in the name of economic development. This is happening all over with new builds on a high amount of farmland, but increasing our population whilst building on the driest and most fertile patches of land is not a winning strategy for long-term food security. So that is a brief cover of Essex and how it came to be. In the late 1980s, there was a huge change from pop to dance music, and with what the ravers and partygoers used to take to the scene. This filtered to the clubs and the pill scene, and the money was not in the drinks sold behind the bar anymore. All the punters were drinking water and buying illegal stuff from dealers inside or out the clubs. Technically, whoever controlled the door to the nightclubs was on a right earner. That's when you had the rise of the 1990s bouncers, who controlled what product went past the door to be sold inside and around the clubs. I remember in Birmingham, the nightclub culture and the battle for the doors had started, with dealers asking, "Are you sorted?" Now in Essex, I don't want to go too much into the Redstone murders, though it is connected, so I'm going to do an outline as I go into our main story. Now this was the time of the Essex boys, but as soon as they teamed up, they'd be over quicker than the punk group the Sex Pistols, but just as notorious. Tony Tucker ran a security firm, putting doormen or bouncers for clubs and pubs. Essex at that time was getting like the Wild West, with fights being a main event on the dance floor. Tony Tucker, a bodybuilder, had developed a friendship of the man we're covering in this video, the Glaswegian gangster Dave King, after becoming fast friends with a love of bodybuilding. Dave King was muscled and 6'3" in height, and was more than capable of handling himself in a situation if it came to it. The two men, Tucker and King, worked together as minders for boxing champion Nigel Benn, and enjoyed the attention and the limelight that had gotten. Back in Essex at the time, Tucker, with his security firm, on paper was making £1,500 a week. But in reality, he was making a hell of a lot more. Whoever controlled the doors was King, and the dealers had to pay Tucker to sell products in clubs. Better still, he could push his own product to dealers, forcing them to buy from him at inflated prices. Tony Tucker recruited Craig Rolfe, a known dealer, and became a driver for Tucker. The fuse would be lit when Tony Tucker's mate, Pat Tate, was released from prison. Pat Tate was a bodybuilder, tightly wound, and had blows of roid rage, losing his nut over anything. With Pat Tate's latest stint in prison, less than a month later, Tucker, Rolfe and Tate will be dead. Leah Betts, an 18-year-old from Latchington, Essex, died on 16th November 1995 after consuming an E-tab during her birthday celebration. Following the ingestion, she drank approximately 7 litres of water within a 90-minute period. This excessive water intake led to water intoxication, or hyponatremia, causing fatal swelling of the brain. The tab may have impaired her body's ability to regulate water balance. Leah collapsed into a coma 4 hours later and remained unconscious until her death 5 days later. Her death received extensive media coverage. Paul Betts was a retired firearms officer with the Metropolitan Police. A widely circulated photograph of Leah in a coma was used in campaigns to highlight the dangers. He campaigned relentlessly. On December 6, 1995, the 3 men, Pat Tate, Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker, were found shot, execution style in a Range Rover, on a remote farm track in Rettendon. The methodical nature of the killings suggests planning and familiarity with firearms. All 3 were shot multiple times with a pump-action shotgun. The Rettendon murders became one of the UK's most notorious gangland killings. I remember with crystal clear clarity the day they were found. At the car garage where I worked, a lot of the car salesmen were from the criminal world who had gone straight. Between talking about horse racing bets for the day, it was the main topic. It was headline news on every channel, something you never ever see covered. The 3 men were heavily involved in dealing. During the height of the rave scene in the UK, they were allegedly becoming increasingly violent, unpredictable and reckless. A botched deal or conflict with rival dealers may have triggered a retaliation. Some sources claim that Tate had threatened or harmed people, including associates and rivals, which created enemies within the criminal world. So who killed them? Two men, Jack Womes and Michael Steele, were convicted of the murders in 1998. Prosecutors claimed that the 3 victims were lured to a secluded farm track under the pretense of a deal in product. They were then shot dead in the Range Rover in a planned ambush. The supposed motive was revenge or a power move, possibly because one of the men, most likely Tate, had become uncontrollable and was jeopardising criminal operations. Alternative theories, though, over the years have circulated. Paul Betts, Leah's father, was arrested as he had a clay pigeon shooting business. His weapons were seized, he was questioned, he never heard of Tucker, Tate or Rolfe, and there was no evidence linking him to the murders. There was rumours of police involvement or corruption. It has never been proven, but this scenario is what I personally think happened. Other ideas are a professional hit ordered by high-level crime figures. The ideal that Steele and Womes were framed, a belief held by some supporters and featured in various documentaries and films. Later this world would be opened up by Bernard Mahoney. It was considered by many the 4th member of the gang who ran the doors for the firm. He wrote a series of books and a fantastic webpage that shone a light and became compelling reading about the pettiness and how outright dangerous Essex was at the time. He also tells how Tony Tucker, his friend, had changed. During the time of the murders, David King, Tony Tucker's friend, was sentenced to a prison term for violently assaulting a man and hiding his victim inside the boot of a car. Born in Glasgow, David King relocated to London, where he became entrenched in the city's criminal underbelly. His imposing physique and reputation as a formidable enforcer. David King made contacts inside and on his release began working for the Canning Town cartel with his close friend Darren Pearman, who was also connected to that cartel, and a football hooligan firm. They both got into regular fights with anyone. One particular fight, a doorman, an ex-wrestler called Ronnie Fuller, got involved breaking up a fight, and Pearman and King were thrown out of the club by Fuller. Pearman had held a grudge against Dorman Fuller, and Fuller years later was savagely attacked and beaten by Darren Pearman and his gang with machetes. Ronnie Fuller, though, injured, managed to wrestle a blade, and Pearman was fatally stabbed by him. Fuller was then arrested. Out on police bail, Ronnie Fuller was shot dead on his doorstep by a hitman on a motorbike. No one has ever been convicted of the murder, though Pearman's father was questioned under police's Operation Tiberius that was looking into Gangland in Essex. All this kicking off did not put David King in a good light with his criminal associates. There was too much police attention. David King had angered many in the firm. David King would then move on to the stolen watch trade, gain the moniker of Rolex Dave. These watches would be sold on to other criminal gangs. David King had started to make solid connections with other criminal groups, including the Russian Mafia, operating in the UK in the early 2000s. He opened a nightclub called Renaissance. It was a prolific dealing hotspot, eventually closed down by the council for this and substantial rent arrears. After the nightclub was closed, David King was dealing product and dealing stolen property and was making a good living from it, but he was also amassing enemies at the same time. Things would take a major turn when customs seized 14 kilograms of gold and brown from France. David King was arrested and bailed. Associate David Sharma was also arrested at the time, but he was held in custody and released on bail much later. Dave Sharma then fled abroad, but later returned and handed himself into police. On October 3, 2003, David King was gunned down outside a gym in Hodgson, Hertfordshire. Assailants in a white van unleashed a barrage of 26 rounds from an AK-47, 5 of which struck King, resulting in his immediate death. Police murder squad detectives would commence an investigation that revealed that David King had become entangled in a deadly web of betrayal. It is thought that the drive-by shooting by masked men in a stolen Peugeot van was the first time an automatic weapon had been fired in a crime in Britain, let alone used to kill. The van and the stolen Mercedes car were later found burnt out, but the police were able to collect forensic evidence from them to link the accused with the murder scene and the weapons used. Following customs interception of a £100,000 Class A gold and brown shipment in 2002, suspicions arose among David King's associates that King was cooperating with the police and was a grass. In a bid to eliminate perceived threats, David King allegedly ordered a hit on former associate David Sharma. However, this move backfired when Roger Vincent and David Smith, associates of Sharma, orchestrated King's murder in retaliation. The trial lasted 7 weeks. Court docs showed a police investigation which tracked more than 100,000 mobile phone calls and took 1,200 witness statements. Officers were able to trace the defendants' movements in the days before the shooting and to catch them discussing the attack over the phone. Court documents had described how David King had been charged but later released, and a 14-kilogram shipment of Class A was intercepted by custom officers, causing rumours among his criminal associates, convinced that he had become a police informer. The firm were making plans to dispose of King, who lived in a $500,000 home in Ardley, financed through his dealing and criminal activities. Gangland debt collector and fixer Roger Vincent, 33 years old, had been given the task of killing David King to Dean Spencer, who then went to the house in Ardley with at least one other man. They became convinced King was waiting for them. They knew his reputation for ruthlessness and his powerful physique as a bodybuilder. They decided to pull out of the deal with Roger Vincent, who became violent when he found out he'd have to do the job himself. He enlisted the help of David Smith, 33 years old, from Elstree, who was to act as his driver and help in the murder. Much of the detailed planning was done on mobile phones, and evidence from bills was used by police to piece together the movements and motives of the main players. 2 weeks later, Vincent Smith killed King as he came out of Hodgson's gym early in the morning. King's friend Ian Crocker, who was with him at the gym, was also shot and injured. The gun was later recovered by a man while walking near Braden Water at Great Yarmouth in Norfolk and saw someone dump a holdall. He investigated and recovered the bag with an AK-47 and spare rounds of ammunition, which matched those in the shooting. Smith's DNA was found on the gun's magazine and on the weapons, and a towel in the holdall had a saliva sample that matched Vincent's. In court, with the evidence, Vincent and Smith were found guilty of murder. Roger Vincent, 33 years old, who fired the gun, was sentenced to a minimum term of 30 years. Getaway driver David Smith, 34 years old, was sentenced to a minimum term of 25 years old. Dean Spencer, who bottled the hit after seeing the size of David King, was sentenced to 9 years and 8 months in prison for the conspiracy and other offences which he also admitted. Spencer admitted conspiracy to rob, breaching a licence and possessing a sawn-off shotgun. The murder of David King highlighted the perilous nature of the criminal world he inhabited. His death served as a grim reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the fragile loyalties within organised crime. King's life and untimely demise show you have no friends in this game, and they can turn on you faster than a knife fight in a phone box. A big thank you to subscriber Louise Lawson, who requested this video with her husband Jim, no fewer than 15 times. I counted, there may be more. Right, to go off topic but still connected, though we have seen many films that portray this life, especially on the Essex boys, I think there's only one film that truly shows the reality of criminal life. An American film you should check out, the 1973 film called The Friends of Eddie Coyle. There's another film that operates from the same world called Killing Them Softly, done many years later with Brad Pitt. Both written by George V. Higgins, who was an attorney and a journalist before becoming an author, who died at 59 years old. Now the scene is Eddie Coyle, played by Robert Mitchum. He gives gunrunner Jackie Brown, played brilliantly by Stephen Keats, a warning. Your word is all you have, and I think it will fit this conclusion to this video perfectly. One of the first things I learned is never to ask a man why he's in a hurry. All you gotta know is, I told the man that he could depend on me, because you told me I could depend on you. Now one of us is going to have a big fat problem. Another thing I learned, if anyone's going to have a problem, you're going to be the one.